So through the day, we have several panels put together, and the idea of these panels is to put together different voices from the research community and the local business and economic development community. And so on each panel, you'll hear from researchers engaged in various projects that the Monessen Centre is conducting or has recently wrapped up. You'll also hear from students from the School of Business, either from the Commerce program or the MBA program, and we've had a number of students working with businesses and community organizations through the year, thanks to funding from OMAFRA. And so you'll be hearing the results of some of these projects, and both the perspective from the student and also the perspective of someone from the business or community organization. And the idea is to put some real feet on these issues and look at how universities and colleges can be working with businesses to support local economic development. And then as well, we've put an economic development voice on each panel. And so the idea is to talk about some of these themes that Scott mentioned we'll be looking at today: the green economy, arts and culture, policy, entrepreneurship, and build this wealth of voices and put them together, hopefully to build real learning that's engaged in both the research community and the real world out there. And that's really our goal as a research center, is to connect those two worlds and build a bridge between them so that there can really be a great impact from work happening at the university in everyday life and in the communities of Eastern Ontario. So without further ado, I'll invite our first panel to come forward and grab a seat, and I'll introduce them while they're making their way forward. Our first panel is entitled Building Sustainable Economies, and the theme here is the green economy. And to give you a feel for what the communities of Eastern Ontario and Southwestern Ontario as well are wrestling with when it comes to the green economy, some questions we've heard as we've held discovery workshops and community leaders have said to us, we're wrestling with the green economy. Some questions we've heard include, what emerging or green industries can we develop and how do we tap into them? How do we overcome the barriers to the adoption of green energy technology? What opportunities and strategies exist for biotechnology, and how do we evaluate the costs of developing that sector? What are the emerging opportunities that could be developed that capitalize on existing workforce skills, infrastructure, community, and natural resources in our area? And should be one more chair. Come on in, Ruth. So these are some of the questions we've heard from the community, and these are the questions that are driving this panel and the reason why we've put it together for you today. Our panelists, our first panelist will be Dr. Alison Blay Palmer, who many of you, if you've been at our events in the past, will be familiar with Alison. She was involved previously in our KISS project and was involved in a project we did for EDCO this year and is now one of the 14 researchers on our research partnerships project for SHIRK that's taking place now. So Dr. Alison Blay Palmer is Associate Professor in the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies at Wilfrid Laurier University. And her research focuses on resilient food systems and sustainable communities. And she's published 2 wonderful books, one Imagining Sustainable Food Systems, and the second Food Fears from Industrial to Sustainable Food Systems. Today she'll be presenting research she did as part of our EDCO project, and her report is actually in your package today. We've made that available to you. That EDCO study actually had 5 researchers, 6 studies in total, and it's available on our website, economicrevitalization.ca, for free. And so you can download it there. But she'll be presenting this one study she did, and the research in this study is being expanded through our new SHIRK project, and so we look forward to added findings in coming years as she works on that. Our second panelist will be Murli Gogula. He's an MBA candidate from QSB. He's the VP of the programming, VP of programming for our Energy and Industry Club, so a great addition to have on our panel. I believe he's worked for DuPont in the past, and any of you interested in agri-science, he's the one to go to. He's got a Master of Science in Plant Breeding from Iowa State University, a Master of Science in Plant Sciences for the University of Hyderabad. And so he'll be presenting some consulting work he did as part of our OMAFRA-funded project. And then, along with Murli, we are honored to have Dr. Yafan Huang. He's President and Chief Scientific Officer for Performance Plants, which was the business that Murli worked with. Performance Plants is a global leader in developing agricultural and biotechnology products, and they're a preeminent plant trait company based right here in Kingston. So they produce food and non-food plants that either have greater seed yield for enhanced food production or increased cellulosic biomass yield for biofuel, the clean energy alternative. And he'll explain what that means if you don't have a degree in science like me. We also are honored to have J.P. Shearer here. He's the Director of Business Development for Kingston Economic Development Corporation. He has an MBA from the University of Glasgow and is part of our local team dedicated to, well, his responsibilities include business attraction, retention, and expansion. And in terms of a green energy, he's been a past director on the board of Switch, which is an alternative energy cluster here in Kingston. He's currently part of the strategic steering group for the New Energy Project, and he's also a pillar champion on the Sustainable Kingston Project. And then our final speaker will be Ruth Noordegraaf. And Ruth is the project manager for the New Energy Project here in Kingston and the region. She was born and raised in the Netherlands. She has a master's degree in urban and regional planning and has worked previously as a project manager and advisor on many different projects. And in her new position with the New Energy Project, she brings together her professional knowledge in project management as well as her personal interest and passion for sustainable development. In addition to her duties with the New Energy Project, she's also an active volunteer with the Kingston Coalition for Active Transportation and Transition Kingston. So please welcome our panelists. And so we'll invite Dr. Alison Blay Palmer to come and speak first.
Thank you very much, Jeff, much appreciated. And thank you very much to Scott and to Yolande for her leadership and to her team for making all of this possible. It's a really wonderful initiative, and it's so heartening to see so many people here who are interested in the work that the project's doing. So I'm very delighted to be part of the project. Thanks. Yeah, we're back there. Okay. Sorry, this is... Okay, what I'm going to do to begin with is just step back a little bit because I have the privilege of being the first speaker for the day. And just to frame things a little bit for you, and I think you'll see these themes emerging as we go on, and I have a timer right here, so that's good. Thank you, as promised. Okay, just to frame things a little bit, and to remind all of ourselves that when we're talking about sustainability, there's a dimension of economics, which is very important and critical to the conversation. But we're also finding out from research that's been going on over the last number of years that there's lots of other dimensions to sustainability as well. And I'd just like to put a few of those on the table in my first couple of slides for you. And then I'm going to get into the research specifically. And the reason I'm doing this is because I think it's going to help inform our research project as it goes forward from the work that I'm doing. So I just wanted to let you know that we're thinking about this. This slide comes from a paper that was done by Berg, Austri, and Zettelmeyer for the International Monetary Fund. It was published last fall. And it talks about the value of linking social well-being, including personal happiness, with things like economic prosperity. And the major finding from their paper was that countries find that improving equality also improves efficiency. And they understood this as more sustainable long-term growth. So what they found was countries that had little discrepancies or as few as possible discrepancies in terms of social indicators within their entire population tended over the long run to have much better economic performance and had more resilient economies. So that's an interesting thing to think about. The United Nations Environment Program is also talks about this dimension of sustainability. And when they're looking at sustainability, they're talking about a whole bunch of things, including economics. They're looking at human well-being, social equity, and they're also talking about environmental and ecological dimensions. And the last slide that sort of helps to set the context for what I'm going to share with you comes from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. This is also from a 2011 study. And what they talk about is green growth as a subset of this idea of sustainable economic development. And what they talk about is the capacity for linking together investment, innovation, and competition through green growth and sustainable economic development. So it's really important to have all of those different dimensions on the table as we move forward to be as effective as we can be. So what I'm going to do over the next 10 minutes is... I guess I'm not reading that timer properly, is to talk to you about the research that was undertaken. And I don't know if Matt Murphy's in the room or not, but I had the privilege of working with a Queen's Business School student on this project that I'm going to be talking to you about. And Matt was the legwork. He probably interviewed some of you in the room, and we're grateful to you for being part of this research. Altogether, there were 40 interviews that were conducted, and that's the sort of the grist for what I'm going to be talking about over the next few minutes. The major finding, and I'm not going to go into the details of what we found in our research because that's in your package, and I don't want to review things that you can access easily. What I want to do is take you to the place that we're getting to with this next thinking that we're doing for developing our project for this summer. And the first is, as part of the research project, when I submitted the report to Yolande, and she said she was very fascinated with this idea of the value-added chain, and she asked me to elaborate on that more. And I didn't do that in the report, but this is an elaboration of the research in the context of a value-added chain. And what we did was we looked at upstream, operational, and downstream dimensions of the green economic work that we were looking at here in Eastern Ontario. And what we ended up focusing on largely, because it was very dominant in the area at the time, was the whole green energy program and the FIT program. And what we found was, when we analyzed that program in terms of this value-added chain, we ended up identifying a lot of benefits all the way throughout the value-added chain that were accruing as a result of the work that was going on in the community. So, for example, there were additional opportunities in terms of employment, especially for youth. There were wonderful training programs that were emerging. There were amazing connections that were being built within the community, for example, through the work that was going on through Switch and other organizations. What we also found, though, were there were some spin-off benefits that weren't really captured by this idea of the value-added chain. And these include environmental and social benefits. And if you look at a typical value-added chain, what they're focused on more is on nuts and bolts. And what I'm suggesting is that we actually need to be talking about values added, and we need to be looking at things in addition to this value chain. We need to be including a conversation about policy, research, funding, and programs, so that we can really have a conversation in a bigger context about what green economic development is all about, and as a result, what sustainable development means. And just to bring that, so that's sort of the big picture thinking that I'm undertaking right now with the project at this point. And the way that that translates into the results from the project that we undertook, the work that we undertook, is as following. So when we're thinking about transferable messages that we can take away from the research that was done, and we put it into this bigger values-added context, we can see a lot of important lessons for the work that's going on here in Eastern Ontario, but also for work that's going on elsewhere in the province and even beyond. So the first idea is that there's a need for stable, transparent policy and programs to support long to medium term projects. So the idea, and this was very much, we heard this from pretty much everybody we spoke to. The policy that was brought in for the feed-in tariff program was fantastic. It needed to have more long-term commitment. And when we're thinking about green growth, this is really critical moving forward, because people cannot make the investments necessary to get that kind of to get the kind of momentum that's needed to make these types of projects successful, unless they have a long-term commitment that they can count on. There's also as part of this, a need for stable funding from innovation through to the consumer. And when I was thinking about this, I was looking around for examples in the world of how this kind of thing could be funded. And one of the things that I came across was something called the World Bank Green Fund. And this is something that's talked about in the report, and there's a sample copy front page sheet from a newsletter that they have. And what this does is it provides opportunities within different jurisdictions. So, for example, the state of California or the country of Japan, where funds are actually set up and made available to entrepreneurs, and they're funded through individual investors. And interestingly, the floating, the way that this pays back to consumers or to people who are investing is the rate of return is anywhere from a floating rate up to 5.2%, 5.26%, sorry, in the case of Japan. And right now, the World Bank has over $3 billion invested through this type of fund, so it's starting to get some legs underneath it. The third recommendation that comes from thinking about things in this big way is the suggestion that we develop a provincial green development institute. And there's a lot of interesting synergies that can be created by having a kind of provincial institute. And I think that what's going on here in the Kingston area speaks to the benefits that could be created if there was a bigger provincial body in terms of creating, identifying resources that exist within different communities, linking those resources together, and building more of a critical mass for green economic activity across the province. Another thing that came out as being really important that Eastern Ontario is doing a good job of in this area is providing training programs to meet supply chain needs. So, for example, through St. Lawrence College, there are really terrific training and skilling programs that are being offered that are really supporting the alternative energy sector that's emerging in this part of the province. Something else that we heard a lot about, and this feeds into sort of that social consumer demand side of this equation, is the need for comprehensive life cycle analysis and full cost accounting. Repeatedly, people said, people who were involved in trying to roll these programs out to the public, that they didn't have the information needed. And this speaks to, I think, Scott was talking about the need for local information. And it's important that people understand the relative benefits of doing things in a more green economic way versus doing things in a more traditional way. And there are some interesting examples. For the United Kingdom, for example, the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology provide a calculating tool online that could be modeled here, just to explain to people the economic benefits and the reduced footprint benefits of using a more fuller cost accounting in terms of carbon footprint. The other two recommendations that emerged are, first of all, the need for multi-pronged market differentiated approaches to sustainable economic development. So communities should be doing what they're good at. Not everybody is going to have the same kind of economic activity related to green initiatives. Everybody has to build on the best use of their resources, so whether it's biomass, inexpensive land, in line with infrastructure, so for example, transmission capacity. And there's also a need for an iterative approach to policy and program development. And this would be building on the work that goes on in the EU, where they adopt the principle of subsidiarity, which is trying to let the people who are going to be living with the consequences of decisions make the decisions. So support them at an upper level in terms of big policy. So that's sort of that green thing that I was talking about. If we adopt this more values-added approach and we look at things with a green lens, we would have policy research and funding that would support these kinds of initiatives, but at the same time let people on the ground take charge of things the way they need to and do things in a place-based way that works for their communities. Just to give you a heads up as to what's coming next, Marianne Stewart, I don't know, Marianne, if you can stand up, please, is going to be doing interviews over the summer, in the spring and summer. So if you're interested in being involved in the next iteration of this project, there's Marianne's email address. She's happy to hear from you. I'm going to be, unfortunately, I have to leave. So if you have any questions, Marianne is the person to talk to. And I'd like to thank you again for being here and for giving me your ear for 10 minutes. So thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Alison. And the details of Alison's upcoming project are in the project summary in your package, and it includes contact information if you'd like to get involved with her research. So next I'll invite Murli to come and present.
So I'll start with the story. In December 2011, I was kind of looking at doing a project, a consulting project, and specific to the agriculture industry. And I was scouting to look at opportunities within the ag industry at that point of time. And that's when I came in contact with Performance Plants Incorporated, which is a Kingston-based company, agriculture biotech company, an excellent company. And that's when I talked to Dr. Yafan, Huang, who's the president and chief scientific officer of the company. And he was like, okay, Murli, we have something for you, and we would want you to have a look at the Indian seed industry and see if we are placed to play a very good role within that seed market, and that's wherein we developed this consulting project there. So I'll start by acknowledging some people who have been key for this project. That one is Dr. Yafan Huang, Mr. John McLeay, who is the advisor on this project, the Queen's MBA Consulting Project Group, and the Morrison Center, which has been helpful in organizing this, and also in terms of some of the finances. They are some of the sponsors of the project. So I'm gonna so this is the agenda. So I'm gonna give a brief introduction of the Indian agriculture as such. What are the major crops of India? What are the challenges? What are the solutions for those kind of challenges that we looked at? And what are the opportunities from a PPI perspective? And then I'll just conclude. So just an introduction of agriculture in India, India has 184 million hectares of arable land at this point of time. It is the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables in the world, and the third largest cereal producer in the world. And that's just an overview. And this is a kind of a graph which shows the major crops of India. Some of the food grains are rice, wheat, sorghum, pearl millet, and maize, and beans. We also have oil seeds like groundnut, mustard, soybean, sunflower, and then we have some cash crops, which are cotton, jute, and mesta. And I just have this showing the area that is under cultivation, what's the production in million tons, and then the yield in quintals per hectare. Though India has a lot of arable land and a lot of production going on at this point of time, there are some challenges associated with this. And you can look at the challenges from different perspectives. One is a population challenge, and that's for the policy or the government to kind of handle. At this point of time, India is 1.21 billion people, which is growing at 1.6% year on year, and it's expected to be 1.62 billion by 2015. So the government has this huge challenge of how do you feed this growing population? And then the other thing is the availability of seeds to the farmers. So that's kind of a shared responsibility between the government and the seed industry, the private seed industry within India. And then, of course, the last one is the changing agroclimatic conditions. There's been an increased incidence of drought and heat within India. And this slide kind of shows the current dryness index within India and what is expected in 2015. So India is becoming more drier, and it's becoming hotter. So there is a population growth, and you have these agroclimatic conditions. Now, there is a huge issue there, like how do you produce enough to feed this population? So what are some of the solutions that are currently available within this agribusiness? So one of the solutions is use of advanced genetic engineering tools and techniques to develop high-yielding varieties of all the crops, and also to develop abiotic stress-tolerant crops. And performance plants, as such, is poised to meet these kind of challenges because they are one of the leaders in developing the second-generation traits, as we call abiotic stress traits at this point of time. And they have over 100 patented genes in their repertoire, and which address some of the challenges I just talked about earlier. So when we were looking at the Indian seed industry, we looked at it in two ways. One was, what are the major crops of India, and how do you rank these? And then, what are the major Indian seed companies? These are not the multinational companies, but the Indian local seed companies. And then, how would you rank them? So we kind of looked at crops in three terms. It's value, to the seed companies, transgenics, whether we have transgenic technology being currently used in those crops, or are there transgenic technologies in the pipeline, and then the volume of seed sales. The reason we have value and volume are as two different parameters there is because value or volume doesn't always translate into value to the seed companies, because there would be a lot, for example, in wheat, you could have a huge volume sale, but there are the technologies that are available at this point of time to develop hybrid seeds is so expensive or not viable that many of the seed companies would not probably want to play in that market. And therefore, they wouldn't have any revenue source from that market. So they probably would not look at wheat as a crop of interest for within the Indian seed industry. And then we also looked at companies as such in terms of what is their market share for each of the crops that we ranked and we identified are the primary crops. What are the R&D capabilities in terms of not only transgenics, but also their breeding capabilities? And then we kind of looked at the IP filings or seed registrations over the past few years to kind of understand if, they have, to kind of understand that they are building those facilities to take up these kind of challenges. And also to look at the future potential for these companies. And we just built the analytical hierarchy process model to rank the crops. So the decision criteria were volume, value, and transgenics. And some of the crops that we looked at was rice, wheat, sorghum, pearl millet, maize, and the list is there. And we ranked the major crops, and then we also did research on the Indian particular seed industry or the seed companies within India and ranked those. There was quite interesting things that we found, and this is kind of a matrix that kind of shows what PPI does, what some of the Indian seed companies do, and what the MNCs do across the capabilities, actually. So you have the value chain, which is genetic discovery, transformation, then specific breeding projects, which are specific to locations, and then the seed marketing and sales, so the distribution network. So, and within India, there are two kind of, the firms in India can be divided into two. One is, you have complete value chain firms that are across the value chain. Well, what we found was that these are not very strong in the genetic discovery and transformation aspects of the value chain. These are companies that have global or regional aspirations, and they're just building on those, and they don't have very strong capabilities. And then there are other companies that are specifically focused only in India as a market, and they only have breeding and seed and marketing and distribution networks, but no genetic or transformation capabilities as such. Whereas the multinational companies, they are across the value chain. PPI, when we consider PPI and India, they have the genetic discovery and transformation platforms, very robust ones, but they don't have any specific breeding programs in India or distribution network in India. So we kind of did this, and then, based on the analyses that we did for the crops and the companies, all those things, we basically came up with kind of two recommendations for them. And one was to look at, so earlier I showed that there are companies that are working on the whole value chain, and then there are specific companies that are only in breeding and seed and marketing and sales. So for the companies that are in the complete value chain, we have proposed that PPI should look at forming strategic partnership with these companies, because one is that they have global and regional aspirations, so they're not only looking at global expansion, but also into Southeast Asia. And they're also building those capabilities and facilities to do some of the genetic discovery and transformation work. So, so one of the things that PPI should be looking at is to develop these partnerships to discover new traits, not only for crops that, not only for genes that were discovered here, but also use some of the germplasms or some of the crops that are present in India and kind of discover new traits there. And then the other thing is licensing. PPI already has over 100 patented genes. So they should look at, they should look at all companies in India and then patent out all the genes, especially with companies that are really good in some of the specific crops that we have identified. So those were the couple of recommendations we came up with. So to conclude, what are the benefits for PPI from exploring the Indian seed market? There are two things. One is that PPI as a company would be able to deliver their products across the globe by having these partnerships or having licensing opportunities in India. And other thing is, apart from that, it will be able to utilize some of the excellent local talent that we have here within Kingston to develop these kind of projects. What are the benefits for the Indian seed industry? The benefits are that through these strong global partnerships and strong relations, one is they build credibility, and the other thing is they are able to compete against multinational corporations. One of the interesting things of the research was that although many of the multinational companies have been operating in India and the Indian seed sector for over 20 years, but still they don't necessarily dominate the industry as such at this point of time. So the local players are really strong. So by forming these kind of partnerships, they can be even better and compete much better against the multinational corporations. And then through these partnerships, they'll be able to develop seed genetics that solves local problems within India and should help them with the revenues, maintain a growth trajectory. And that's the presentation. Thank you.
Next, we'll invite Dr. Huang to come and talk about his experience as a local firm in Eastern Ontario tapping into some of these global opportunities.
Good morning, everyone. Very excited to be here. Thanks, Jeff, for organizing this very exciting conference. To me, I'm a grad student. I graduated from Queen's, got my PhD here, a classically trained molecular biologist with very little, previously with really little knowledge in economics, and the only interaction we used to have about economics is playing grad league soccer against their students. So, but I think it's come to the end after many years of working as a basic research scientist, and then come along to lead a biotech company locally. And it's become increasingly, to me, I'm reading more economical kind of journals than scientific journals these days, because science and economics come hand in hand. And I just want to present you a little story about our company, how we develop our business, pretty much based on the analysis that we have done economically. And thanks for Murli to help us to try to identify the opportunities in India. And he did a good job summarizing a very big market potentials there. So just to want to update you about, I just came back from a the so-called World Crop Conference in Charlotte, North Carolina. The topic there is exactly the same as here. And how do we provide, how do we address the food security and global sustainability of agriculture? Because population is going to be 9 billion, according to the economists projected by 2050. And how do you use the limited amount of land to feed the growing population, not only growing population, also increasing demand from the BRIC countries? So that's how we set the tunes for the performance plan. And we wanted to be leading agriculture trade provider, a technology provider for the global market. And that's pretty easy to say, but very difficult to do because we are located in Kingston. But I feel very comforting to have so much, such Queen's Business School, the Morrison Center, such a brain power. When I run around in the world, I always feel comfortable to think of Queen's Business School as one of the top schools in the world. So if I have questions, I know where to go to ask for questions and answers. So looking back, this paper was published in 1982, trying to dissect out what's limiting productivity in agriculture. And in essence, farmers typically getting about 21% of the actual yield of the genetic potential. So all the yields hidden yields lost due to environmental factors. And you look at what caused the yield reduction is like something in the environments. Salt, drought, heat and drought combined, cold stress, acidic soil. All this cause huge loss in comparison to insects and weed problems. So if you can solve the problem genetically, finding out solutions, and you may be able to expand the green area to a larger area so that you can produce more food per land unit. So our technology developed just because of this simple diagram that we developed our technology, spent a lot of time trying to find research solution to these areas. So just a quick snapshot about Performance Plants. It's a Queen spin-off company founded in the height of first generation of agriculture about tech in 1995. We were pretty naive when we found the people found the company with a couple of professors, thinking that we will be printing money by 2000? But it's not so simple. And so, as you see, we grind through the first 6-7 years, basically did a lot of groundwork in technology development because everything has any impacts, you have to fundamentally novel and fundamentally new. So the first, you look at the first 7 years picture, then you will see very little activity, but however, there's a lot of activity happening in the lab. We only signed a deal with Dow AgroScience in the 98, and then subsequently, you look at the more busy scheme in the last few years. We signed a deal with DuPont and Bayer Crop Science, RiceTech, Scott, Syngenta, mostly the multinationals. That summarizes one of the thinking here. The thinking was that in order to be successful as a technology provider, you've got to be recognized by the multinationals, the big boys. And however, through the last 2 or 3 years of business work, then we found out that that's not exactly true. Yes, it's true that you can be recognized and licensed. The multinationals can recognize your technology and license it and pay you handsomely. However, they are also the gatekeepers, and they develop their own technologies. And they will use their technology first before they use your technology. So we discovered that the emerging opportunity might be in where the population lays. For example, China. So we set up a consultant companies in Beijing to study the market there. So India is another example, with 1.2 billion people approaching the Chinese population, and in a lot of crops is more substantial than America. So that's looking at the same map that we live on. In the blue area where the water is plentiful, according to agricultural term, because agriculture consumes 75% of the water that human consume. So, but you look at where the water is lacking, severely lacking, is in the red area, which is like northwest China and South America, some countries, and India. Being in India in 2009 in March, it was like 37 degrees every day, so you know how important it is in terms of water and temperature. And Africa is severely lacking water, Australia also. So just zoom into China, and attend those economics conference sometimes, just to figure out what's the distribution of the resources. 65% of the crops, the grain crops produced by in China is in this area, northwest of Yangtze River, and 65% of the food is produced in this area, but only 20% of the water resources available. So where is the water? The water is in the southern China, but you cannot transport the water to help the food growth. So this is the area that we will help using technology to address the agricultural problem. And last year, there's a very striking article published in The Economist. Just say the title is 1 degree over, realizing that all these stable crops, soybean, rice, corn, wheat, canola, if they have their ideal limits, ideal growing temperature, if the temperature 1 degree over that limit, then we have major reduction in yield. So this is so-called 1 degree over. We're talking about a time of rising temperature in the global scene. So 6-7 years ago, we started genetic screen trying to find genes that address that problem. So eventually, we found genes that can address that problem, which is this plant, we found that gene always expressing that gene. That gene comes from the same plant, and it cannot tolerate the 31 degrees canola in these canola plants. With the same plant with the extra gene in it, it can tolerate that temperature and produce healthy yield. So that's very important for people in India and China. Talking about a business model, and it's multiple modeling. But it's very typical, and you know more than me that the company have to be surviving from technology licensing fee and all the milestone fee, royalty payment. But we are looking more into the downstream when our technology is in the people's seats, and then you can sell them, and then that's a really big return. And thanks for KEDCO hosting our signing ceremony last year here at the City Hall. JP, you recognize yourself. And it's one of the milestone signing because that's the first deal we signed with China for a company from Beijing. And then subsequently, we signed a deal in Yangling near Xi'an with another canola company with the trip with ISTP at Canada. In the same week, I went down to Shenzhen in China, signed a deal with the only GMO company that's selling cotton. So, and the week after, we came back from China and signed a deal with Bayer Crop Science, working on the global scale of use of our technology. So very interesting. This company working on cotton, and this company also working on cotton with the same technology. So we are talking about working with multinationals at the same time, working with a regional powerhouse in terms of marketing. And the next, of course, we are going to look into India and Brazil and this marketplace, and hopefully there will be much more potential there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huang. Next, we'll invite JP to come forward and talk about, from a local economic development perspective, what it takes to support the green sector and biotech firms like PPI.
Thank you, Jeff. And on behalf of Kingston Economic Development Corporation, for all those who are out of town, I'd like to welcome you to Kingston. And we do hope you take time to spend some money in our bars and restaurants. And I'll give you the heads up, Jeff, when I finish my 10-minute introduction. But I would also like to say that I am not an economist. I'm not an environmentalist. But I don't claim to be an expert in anything, but I do speak fluent Scottish. And Jeff I've only have 10 minutes, which forces me to speed up. So if I do lose any of you, it's Jeff's fault for only giving me 10 minutes. But and it may come to no surprise to my colleagues that what I've been given to talk about isn't actually what I may talk about, but I'll actually get there in the end. And in true academic style, I'm going to start with the macro and bring it down to micro, and Scott and Yolanda will like that, and of course, Dean. So anyway, in terms of, I want to start off with, what preceded sustainability and try and get a bit behind sustainability, because I think part of this gets to the point where it affects the economic development side of things and the challenges that it does bring to us on a local level. And it came out of a sustained yield, which strives to harvest only the crop that naturally can bring before the next harvest. And it's sort of living off the interest and never touching the principle, which is something I very rarely see. But, you know, the fundamentals that stem from an ecological theory that the forestry and fisheries and through harvest, and it was really an extraction of our natural resources, which never exceeded the actual growth. But sustainability, as we know, it's not a new concept at all. And, you know, the indigenous people have been striving for centuries to find what sustainability actually means. In terms of you know, this statement, it's 25 years old, it's broad and generic in nature, and it's from the Brundtland Commission, and it's aimed at covering the economic, the environmental and social principles of economic development. But, you know, it's been very rarely quoted over 25 years until, you know, suddenly the community is required to put an integrated community sustainability plan in place. And I would find it hard not to find a sustainability plan or an integrated community sustainability plan that doesn't have this in it. It's 25 years later, and, you know, the Brundtland report does still apply today. And including those messages of precaution and caution that were given down to us, and those regarding climate change. And they can be viewed as positive in the fact that at that time it had tremendous insight and tremendous vision in order for the, you know, the changing environment and changing economy. But also it can be seen as negative. In 25 years we've done very little to change things towards the community concerns that we have. But I fully believe that our focus is changing. Well, I want to go is the opposite way, and in 1993, Rogan actually championed the idea that the sustainable development or sustainable growth was actually an oxymoron. He challenged it and said that he can only make sense of development if it's actually associated with no growth to the scale of the economy. So the debate is around in terms of what necessary for sustainability, does it link to the scale, or the optimal scale of that economy? And there's two concepts under that form of degrowth. It's sought degrowth and there's undergone degrowth. And the undergone degrowth really talks to a recession. Quite frankly, I think when we talk about recession, it's talking about overspending and not about undergone degrowth. The paradigm proposition of that degrowth is actually that the economic growth is not sustainable and that human progress without economic growth is possible. And I remember sitting in a session, and Don Grant's here who challenged her, who brought forward our sustainable Kingston plan. Stand up, Don, so everybody can see you. There you go. This is Don. I've always wanted to say that. Stand up, please. So Don championed our sustainable Kingston plan through, and I remember sitting in a session and one woman said, well, I think we should be degrowth or ungrowth. And I said, what do you mean by that? And I'll chat a little bit about that later, but it took me by surprise that somebody would actually offer that as an option, you know, moving forward. So the challenge is that we've got two conflicting notions out there. One is growth and one is ungrowth or degrowth. And my challenge is that, you know, from an economic development perspective, we look at sustainable development, advocating support for economic growth, as long as it doesn't interfere with human or the environment. But also, the Club of Rome, they concluded in order to avoid ecological and demographic and resource disasters in the near future, it was necessary to stop demographic and economic growth. So, from an economic development perspective, is ungrowth and degrowth achievable in municipalities? I mean, from my perspective, I would hate to go to my CEO, my board of directors, and city council and ask them for my yearly budget, requesting funding, and tell them I'm actually about to ungrow and degrow. I don't think it would work. Because the challenge I made to the woman was, that's fine if you see that as a principle moving forward, but our challenge is, what's the impact on taxes? What's the impact on healthcare and education and social structures and jobs and investment? Because from an economic development perspective, that's what I believe my role to be, to drive the economy of Kingston forward from a jobs and investment perspective. It's the core of everything we do. So if we're undergoing degrowth or undergoing no growth, then what's the perspective on that? And it impacts on rural-urban relationships as well. You know, we're working on, you know, if you look at the milk quota system that we have in Canada at the moment, You know, there's a tariff around to bring in dairy products from the US is 288%. Now, they can come and set up a manufacturing plant, but the challenge is the milk quota system doesn't allow them to. There used to be 40,000 dairy farms in the whole of Canada. Now today we have 13,000. The dairy farmers in this region tell us they can meet the milk quota. They're just not allowed to. So what's sustainable about that? And maybe, you know, in all of this, it's not really about whether it's about economic growth on one side or whether it's about no growth on the other side. Maybe it's just about removing everything and talking about smart growth and how we move forward on a smart basis. I want to talk about the challenge that we have here. This is the Mojave Desert, and even conflicts, you know, happen in a small geographical area. And this was a $1.8 billion solar farm, which was put up with a wind farm, a geothermal project as well. And the challenge here was, as an article in the LA Times actually said, that the Wilderness Society opposed the project, and their partners, the Wildland Conservation Society, they supported it. So is it conflict, or is it justification of a democratic society that we have? But it just shows you there's some challenges out there from an economic development perspective. Sustainable and green. Don knows this because I've challenged him all the time. They're the two most overused words in the world. And the reason I say that is because every conceivable company is jumping on the Enviro bandwagon. And they're claiming to be green and they're claiming to be sustainable. And it's a word, is these words, are they driving consumerism, or are they actually helping the environment to move forward? And the words, you know, they have become it's become an adjective, and it's not necessarily a verb. And the marketers are seeing it as a new toy. It's a new buzzword that they can use and brand everything with. So are the words so overused that we're now bordering on the sense of false advertising? And that's a challenge that I make. So when we look at this, you know, we need to look at, is the world changing, or is the world unchanging? And the BRIC countries, the Brazils, the Russias, the Indias, and the Chinas, they're emerging economies, and along with South Korea, Mexico, and Indonesia, they're making up half of all global growth by 2025. So it's an insatiable appetite for resources out there, and there's a growing economies and growing in demographics. But alone, China and India account for 40% of the world's population. So what measures can go in place to control their growth, and does that bring us into balance of economic growth and degrowth and non-growth? But in terms of closer to home, we believe that the world is changing. Of course it is. And bring it down to Ontario level, we talk about the Ontario Green Energy Act, which Alison touched on earlier. And it was launched in 2009. And the plan was to encourage jobs and investment and to really be a leader in North America on renewable energy. The challenge was that it wasn't only investment, it was about foreign direct investment. So the plan was that they received almost 3 applications an hour, 24/7, 365 days in the first year. The farmers were harvesting the sun and wind, so there was a rejuvenation of the rural areas. It was one of the richest feed-in tariffs in the world. And also the domestic content enforced that that foreign direct investment would come into the province. And then they claimed that 50,000 direct and indirect jobs would be created. The challenge here, and our MP isn't here, is he? No, typical. He knew I was speaking. But, you know, I've said to Ted before when he was executive director at Switch, the challenge is the integration between the federal government and the Ontario government, because the federal government have cut their eco-energy tax, you know, at the same time while Ontario is trying to drive forward. So from an economic development perspective, the federal government aren't talking to the Ontario government in terms of how we can move forward as a country, not just as a province. So we look at, you know, it's a complex system. Of course it was put in place. Everybody had a slightly different interpretation of it. And, you know, but the more interpretations we've gathered through that process, the easier it becomes to make a sense of the whole. Consumer confidence dipped because the feed-in tariff was too high, panels were too high in price. The attraction of foreign direct investment dipped. The tinkering of the programme through solar farms, you know, that didn't help consumer confidence. There was an under-resourced review office that caused major backup and delays. And only 2,000 FIT contracts have actually been put in place out of 22,000 applications. There's only 10% actually up and running. It created 20,000 jobs, but hey, we're in Ontario Green Energy Act 2. We're under review, which is excellent. There's been several strong recommendations in terms of the reduction of solar by 20%, reduction of wind tariff by 15%, more municipal engagement, which is excellent. We have 5 projects going on in and around the Kingston area. plus an offshore wind farm, which some of you may have heard about, plus Wolf Island. In total, in the next 5 to 6 years, we could have a total of somewhere in the region of 800 megawatt of power developed by wind and solar just through this, the feed-in tariff, which is phenomenal for a municipality of our size, and that's working in conjunction with our rural colleagues. And we're shortening the application time in 25% as well. You know, but the challenges still remain. I still believe it's an economic decision and not an environmental decision that people are making today. And there's going to be a tipping point where that actually changes. So what does it all mean for Kingston? The overall the sustainability plan was put in place, and we have implemented it. It's an adoption of 4 pillars that ties into council priorities in terms of maintaining, enhancing infrastructure, economic development, rejuvenating brownfields, affordable housing, creating green spaces, and developing proactive community plans. But it's a bottom-up approach that we're trying. So, you know, where it's convenient to organise sustainability into, you know, sort of 4 buckets, it's also the integration between the 4 of them that drives sustainability, and it highlights the opportunities that we have for innovation and duplication of, and it avoids that duplication of effort, or reduces it, mitigates it, minimises it. But our collective efforts, and this is why we need to get to, is our collective efforts go beyond that just of green energy. It goes beyond wind and solar. It goes beyond geothermal. So what's driving Kingston forward from that perspective, and we're very integrated from an economic development perspective, is land planning. We're looking at brownfields. We've identified 15 brownfields in Kingston at the moment that we're actually undergoing a review in order to develop and build. The development next door to us, in terms of the condominiums and the hotel, was built on a brownfield. There's tax incentives to do that, and we're continuing to drive that forward. We're looking at transportation master plans where faster express routes get people downtown. 85% of all traffic coming downtown is driven by car, and we need to reduce that. And there's a motion before council going that we look to increase parking fees to try and push more people onto transportation. Your waste, we're looking at high recycling, but 65% of all waste is recycled. We also have an organics program, and we're also looking at waste to energy, because I fully believe that we can say 65%. In my mind, that's great, but we also have another 35% of waste that's not been recycled, and we need to drive that agenda as well. And also waste to energy, how can we reduce the stuff going to landfill? Innovation through the work of Yafan at Performance Plants, through the Janice with Innovation Park, through companies like Sneakers Innovation, Maryzone, Green Centre Canada, Partech. We're driving innovation, and we want to become the centre of innovation in Ontario. Housing, we have a critical problem, 0.3% of a vacancy rate in Kingston in the downtown core, 0.9% across the city. That is not sustainable. We need at least 2,000 homes to rent in order to become sustainable. We're far away from that, and we have plans in place to change the landscape on that. The energy, not only in terms of producing energy, but also conservation. We also have a solar panel manufacturing town, and a lot of developers and a lot of installers. Ecotourism is important to us as well. You know, taking into the rural connections as well, about creating employment in the communities around us. We also have the 100-kilometre food, local food farmers markets, the biosphere in our provincial parks. Design and build construct. How can we find different ways to build? How can we find new ways to build? How can we find new materials to build with? The City of Kingston's taken the lead on that through having a motion that all City Council buildings built from now on, including the KEDCO Centre, the new police station, the Invista Centre, will all be LEED design, and we're trying to encourage developers to do that as well. Water and wastewater, our upgrading of Ravensview water treatment plant was some of the leading, through Veolia, some of the world's leading water technology. The water being dumped into the lake now is as clean as the stuff that's coming out your tap. And there was a promise by the CEO of Utilities Kingston that he would drink a glass. Still hasn't done it, but we still hold him to it. But that's changing the way that the water's going into the lake, and it's changing the fisheries and the ecological system of our lakes as well. Agriculture and food's very important. We're bordered around. And an important fact here is that the City of Kingston is actually 88% rural in terms of landmass. Not a lot of people know that. Our urban centre is south of the 401, and it's condensed, and there's a lot of density. North of the 401, 88% of our city is actual rural, and our local foods programme as well. Materials and chemicals through the work of Green Centre Canada, and changing the way we de-risk chemicals, and we drive that stuff from ideas to discovery through to development. The urban and rural ties. that we have in terms of the partnerships are overly important, and Ruth will touch upon some of that in the new energy. Our governance, it comes from the city, it comes from the municipalities, it comes from federal government, and it's the drive of those policies, the integration of those policies up through 3 levels that are going to change that. And then the skills and education development through major institutions of Royal Military College, Queen's and St Lawrence. I've nearly finished, Jeff. Responsibility. There's no, you know, the responsibility side is important as well, because we're all responsible. And, you know, it's no single drop of water thinks it's responsible for flood. If we change the mindset and say we're all responsible, everybody in this room and everybody beyond this room, then we'll begin to change the mindset of Kingston, and we'll begin to change the mindset of our municipal government and enforce that forward. It comes from the bottom up, and it comes from people like us. And, you know, too many people say, you know, about the avoidance of issues, and it's, you know, it's about competing and conflicting, it's about collaborating. And, you know, one thing is, it's not about what the city can do for you, it's about what you can do for our city and for the cities that you go back to after today. So, you know, the last slide, heads up, Jeff, head on the last slide. The last slide is, and, you know, I'll leave you on a fun matter here, because it's no matter what we do, there's always going to be people out there. There's always going to be the Dimbas, and they're the people who are the dollars in my bank account. And then you're going to have the NIMBYs, and they're not in my backyard. And then, of course, you're going to have the notes, and that's not over there either. And, of course, you're going to have the Nyabis, and that's not in anyone's backyard. You're going to have the bananas, and that's billed absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. In association with the bananas, you have the fruits. And the fruits are important because they are fear revitalisation, urban infill and towers. And I know you're all sitting there saying, I know some of these people. And then, of course, you get Sobeys, and I'm not talking about the Sobeys, the grocery store, or Loblaws. We're talking about some other bugger's backyard. Thank you.
So one last, well, thank you very much, JP. And we met Ruth at our workshop in Frontenac County with Anne-Marie Young back in November. And in addition to green energy, some of the big issues we hear from communities are immigration attraction, youth retention and attraction, how do we attract knowledge workers? Well, here we have a triple threat. So Ruth, come on forward.
Well, thanks. Okay. Is this, can everybody hear me? Okay, perfect. Well, thanks, Jeff. Well, here I am, a triple, how do you say it? Threat? Oh, wow. And I don't have a Scottish accent, but I can speak Dutch. So anyway, thank you so much for being here and be part of this excellent panel. I'm not an academic, but I do have experience in working in regional development in both in the Netherlands and also in Canada. So I figured that it's nice to give a little bit of a view of my experience, and Jeff also asked me to talk a little bit about my personal story of why we came to Canada. So I think I'm the pet immigrant today. Anyway, and also obviously to talk about the new energy projects, and all in 10 minutes. So here I go. Besides from my work with the New Energy Project, I also work for the Kingston Immigration Partnership. So that's kind of an odd combination, but it's interesting for today because I think building sustainable economies and communities is all based on the people. People from within the city and the rural area, but also people that maybe come from other countries. And the question, who do we need? How do we forecast people? And so on. So I will first talk a little bit about why my personal story, which is the easy part. Don't worry, I'm not going to share all my family pictures, but these are two similar situations. But the first picture obviously is in the Netherlands, and the second one is in Canada. I also just want to pitch my new bike and my daughter. Anyway, obviously similar situations, but both in different countries. Back in the Netherlands, where I used to work as an urban and regional planner, mainly in projects in urban and rural communities, focusing on sustainability and building. And now in Canada, I focus on both the new energy project and regional development and sustainable development, and also immigration. So it's kind of an interesting mix. So I will start with this because many people ask us, why do you move from the Netherlands to Canada? I mean, the Netherlands is a great country, and that's true. However, and obviously this is the image that a lot of people have, people that came here just after the Second World War really took on the adventure. There were no airplanes, there was no Skype, there was no social media. So we moved the easy answer because we could. Because I can, and the world is much smaller. So if you have a certain career, you can basically do or pursue your career everywhere. I think the longer answer for us was that we felt that the Netherlands is small, is overcrowded, and just to kind of compare it to Canada, the Netherlands fits 26 times in the province of Ontario. And it fits about 400 times in Canada. And the density, if you compare the density in the Netherlands with Canada, if you have the same density here, we are speaking of 4 billion Canadians. So that's kind of to show how different that the country is. It's still great, but we felt that we wanted to move to Canada. And of course, this is kind of the... It's not really, it's not me, it's not my husband, but I kind of like this image because I think we moved here and we moved to the Kingston area because we felt that this lifestyle, this country and this region is the place for us to pursue our personal and professional lives. And KEDCO or Anne-Marie or Lennox and Addington is not paying me to say this, but it's true. We really like this location, the proximity with the bigger cities, and professional opportunities and community, being part of this community. So that's kind of my pitch, I guess, for moving to Kingston or the area. So back to building sustainable economies. And obviously with my experience in working in the Netherlands in regional development, I thought about kind of making a comparison between a Dutch region and the Kingston, Frontenac, and Lennox and Addington area. And obviously you want to see more of my family pictures, well, then you maybe have to ask me afterwards. However, building sustainable economies, I think we do it everywhere in the world, so it's interesting to see two similar situations. Back in 2008, I worked in the southeastern part of the Netherlands in the province called Brabant. It's the green area, and obviously now I'm here. But both regions face the same challenges and they have the same opportunities. In southeastern Brabant, I used to work both for a bigger city, which you can compare with Kingston, a university city, vibrant, but also some issues. And I also used to work for a rural municipality. And same questions. How do we build our economy? How do we keep our people? What is our vision? How do we collaborate? All kind of similar issues that we also face, and we're working on it. And JP had an excellent presentation of what is happening in Kingston. But we have the same kind of challenges in this region. Things like transportation, internet connections, accessibility, housing, all issues that I faced with as well in the southeastern Netherlands when I worked there. So we have also this these are the challenges. We also have similar opportunities, in my opinion. People nowadays choose for a certain lifestyle. For instance, in Kingston, people actually make the decision maybe to move to Toronto after they graduate, but a lot of them come back because they really want to live in this region. Also, there is more flexibility in work. We can work remotely. A lot of people don't have to work from 9 till 5, and I think that's really a big opportunity for sustainable or building a region and attracting people. Obviously, and I think we'll talk about the creative economy after this panel, but the green economy, which I will touch on briefly, is also a huge opportunity for this region, and we already are working on that. And last but not least, I think new partnerships, which is new energy, is one of those, and also having a shared vision is key for regional development, both in Holland but also here. So in Holland, it's funny because now I live here and I see that tagline in the region where I used to work. They actually tagged the region as the brain port, and they named themselves the world's smartest region. I don't know how they're actually measuring that, but it's interesting to see that they have the same development. They, for instance, invested in transportation, better transportation, and they also invested in, it's called village development plans. And here in the rural area we have, and I think also in Kingston, we have community improvement plans, which is kind of the same development. So it's funny to see the similarities. So I have 2 minutes left to talk about new energy. Well, I will try. So what happens in the Kingston, Frontenac, and Lennox and Addington area? A couple of years ago, and I think most of you are actually able to see the wind turbines from here, some stakeholders actually came together and kind of made this shared vision that we have the wind turbines, we have solar panels, we have lots of great innovations that we also heard about in this panel. We have Queens, we have St. Lawrence, we have RMC, and we have a lot of people with great ideas. How can we actually work together and brand this region, the Kingston, Frontenac, and Lennox and Addington area, as a place that has new energy? So it's not only renewable energy, it's also new innovations, keeping people, attracting people, and really pitching this region as the place to be. So the New Energy Project is a collaboration between the economic developers in the region, Queen's University, St. Lawrence College, and a couple of private businesses. So it's an example of a public-private partnership initiative. And we try to, first of all, figure out what do we already have, because we already have a lot of great initiatives here. Where are the gaps? What do we need? And how can we actually attract, or how can we obviously fill those gaps, and how can we encourage new partnerships and new projects in this region that all make our region a region with new energy. So this kind of sums it up. We're talking about new energy, sustainable building, a retention of knowledge or youth and knowledge workers. For instance, one of the examples is Lafarge, that is doing a biomass trial in Bath, which is an excellent example of trying to have or inventing new things and promoting the region and reaching out to people. This is what we have, this is what we're actually doing in this region. You also see a biodigester, which is it's officially not in the Kingston, Frontenac, and Addington area. However, it is an excellent example of also, for instance, new energy in rural areas, providing people in the agriculture with new ways and innovative ways to, for instance, get more energy, or to have an extra additional financial or a revenue stream. So I think my time is up, but I just wanted to, and I can talk about new energy and the Kingston Immigration Partnership for hours, so don't ask me about it afterwards. No, just my personal kind of wrap up about my idea of building sustainable economies, also based on my more practical common sense experience. I mean, I'm definitely not an academic. I think for a region it's essential to find your assets. Like, what do we have in this region, and how can we use them to actually have that smart growth that we want in this region? And be creative. I think finding that kind of urban-rural connection and start collaborating and start the conversation, how can we work together, is also key. And JP, I love your dimbas, fruits, notes, and bananas. I just had the NIMBYs, but I think it kind of really shows us we always will have people that are gonna be have roadblocks and are challenging us. So break down silos as well and invest in new partnerships, such as new energy projects. And last but not least, if we have a vision, if we know who we want and who we need, we can also attract and retain the people and the businesses that we need in a region. So this is a very not very in-depth presentation, but it kind of hopefully gives an idea of how I look at sustainable economies and what we've tried to do in this region. We're not there yet, but I think we're all trying. So thanks.